So I just want to share with you when I was a kid, what actually stimulated my idea that I wanted to do what I'm doing, which is create stories and visual stories. And this Tintin was basically the big catalyst in my life. I must have seen my first Tintin when I was about 5 years old. I've got them all. I've only got two here, but I've got every single one of those. Three, four, two, three, 24 of them, 23 if you take that one out. There are a few others which aren't technically. There was a one, the Sharks, which is made from the animated movie, etc. But there's about 23, 24 albums, and I have them all, and I love them. And this was I really loved them. I mean, I, I I obsessed about them, and what I loved was just the stories. Stories where Tintin would always go to these amazing places. He would, his early ones, his very first one, he goes to the Soviet. In those days, it was Soviet Russia. Then he went to America. This one is based in Egypt. He went to the east to China. He went to South America, which is a big place, I know, but somewhere, I take it, that was on the Amazon. He went to Scotland. He went to somewhere in Middle East Europe here. Probably, I don't want to say where because I'll get corrected, but let's just say Soldovia, I think, was the name of the place in the book. He went to North Africa here, or the deserts. This will be in the North Atlantic, the shooting star where the meteorite came down. He went on a double adventure here to probably the Caribbean. Although what is lovely about Tintin, or what I loved, is these are specific places. They can be like Flight 714 to Sydney. Sydney is a place. Tibet is a place. Where else? Okay, the moon, obviously. But these can also be generic places. That desert could be anywhere. Okay, Black Island is very definitely Scotland. America is America, but a lot of it's not quite world building because he hasn't created something out of nothing here. They do exist, but where they are is not that important, and that's what I loved about the Tintin stories. Is they could be anywhere. They're slightly generic in that way, but anyway, running through all these places, including the moon, Tibet, etc., Central America, the Red Sea. What I loved as a kid was that, and that being he traveled, and he was a reporter. When his his backstory is he was always a reporter. But in those days, they didn't have the internet. Obviously, they didn't have even TV. Radio was big, but reporters that went somewhere and reported and brought back a story, or they would telex it over the wire. They were big deals, and they were kind of their talk show hosts, or whatever, the equivalent today. They were stars back in those days when this was created. So Tintin was one of those guys. He would go to all these amazing places and have all these amazing adventures. And when you were a kid like I was, like we all were, and we didn't really have a lot of TV or other, we weren't exposed to a lot of other forms of entertainment, if you want to call it that. We had books, and we had obviously the stuff on TV, but it wasn't that interesting compared to this. And that's what hooked me, is that he traveled, or Herge made Tintin travel to all these exotic, adventurous places, which I never, obviously, as a kid, went to. And it did two things to me. It planted a seed in me that I wanted to create stories like this. And also, the second thing is planted the seed in me to travel, which I love doing as well. So that was the stimulus to me getting into a creative field. And these are two of my favorite ones, actually. Calculus Affair, one of the one of the best Herge stories. Black Island, love it. And probably my other favorites, just looking this, Tintin in Tibet, outstanding. Flight 714, that was great. And then the two destination explorers on the moon. Those are probably my favorites, and possibly those two as well. Yeah, this was his last finished one, and this was the last concept. He never got to finish that one. At this stage, he had given up his plus fours. Tintin always had these plus fours, and at this stage, you can't see it, but he's wearing, at some stage, he's wearing jeans here. So Herge was changing him. Towards the end, he changed the whole look of Tintin, if you want to call it that. But the stories were very, very powerful, very complex, often very clever. The artwork, if you look at the artwork, it's astounding. And towards his very first albums, when he started, he did everything himself. But when he got to the Blue Lotus, he was encouraged to actually study and get reference and just up his game to be better. So actually, a lot of these have been redrawn. In fact, a lot of these have been remanufactured, but redrawn, updated. But from there on, his first three were quite rough. But from there on, he really put a lot of time into actual getting everything right technically, and the buildings, the people, the dress, etc. So very, very detailed. So he built up this studio around him that did a lot of the backgrounds, a lot of the, like, these vehicles, etc. would be done by somebody else, and he would just sketch out. He would obviously he was the only person who knew what was going on in the story, but he had to sketch it out, and people would come and do. He had a person doing all the coloring, somebody doing all the vegetation, etc., etc. So very well polished, very well finished albums now. For instance, in this particular one, when it first came out, it was rather, the story hasn't changed, but a lot of the details weren't right. So he sent one of his artists back to England to go and shoot these scenes. So that is actually based on one of the photographs. All of it is technically accurate now. So incredible amount of work and research went into this. I know with this one, but they're all like this. But just using these two that I have here as an example, I know that this as well was like that station there. The detail in it is absolutely correct. This hotel here that they stay in I think is at Geneva. It's absolutely accurate. At a later stage, what I want to do is, I've got a lot of Herge's books on Herge, and I want to go through that and just talk through some of the stuff, because it's very interesting when you see a lot of the hand-drawn pencil work he was doing and reference and stuff. Very, very interesting. But yeah, this is where my love of stories and creating stories visually came from. Tintin and Herge.